My name is Andrea Ó Súilleabháin, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the International Peace Institute today for the launch of the Guiding Principles on Young People's Participation in Peacebuilding. Today's generation of young people at 1.2 billion is the largest the world has ever known. Despite frequent images in the media of youth movements as sources of unrest, the percent of young people who actually engage in violence is extremely low across conflict-affected states. Instead, the ideas and leadership of young people are a rich resource for the prevention and resolution of conflict. Today, we will hear more about the process and the content of the guiding principles, which resulted from the contributions of over 1,000 people dedicated to recognizing the value of young people in peacebuilding. This process was led by the UN Peacebuilding Support Office and Search for Common Ground as co-chairs of a dedicated working group on these issues. As we begin, I'm pleased to welcome two speakers to offer opening remarks. First, Ambassador Paul Sager, Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations. Ambassador?
Well, thanks a lot, and thanks very much also to give me the opportunity to offer some opening remarks. You may wonder what I am doing here on opening remarks on guiding principles on youth participation in peace processes. I'm not necessarily qualifying as youth anymore. Actually, my two sons, which are 18 and 20 years old, they consider me as terribly old. So. Basically, I think there are two reasons why I'm standing here. First of all, we paid for your food. I hope you enjoy that one. We also paid for the translation of the guiding principles in languages like Arabic, Russian, Spanish, and others as well. So we actually try to make a practical contribution to the dissemination of these guiding principles. But joke aside, there is maybe another reason why I may be qualified to be here. I'm chairing the peacebuilding configuration on Burundi. And in that function, I have to deal quite often with issues related precisely to these guiding principles here. And I see that youth can be quite an important factor in promoting peace, both on the positive, but unfortunately at times also on the negative side. I met some youth in Burundi who have made absolutely stunning contributions to the peace-building process in the country. One example I'm still struck with is a young former rebel who, through the help also to the PBSO, had been able to open up its own business with only $5,000 and created jobs, and then with creating jobs also integrated other people who have been formerly rebels. So that's for me an excellent contribution and a way how social and economic integration can promote youth. On the other side, there is also a risk that youth are being instrumentalized, and we have another unfortunate example also in Burundi. We have the leading party has a youth organization called the Imbonerakure. They are being radicalized now and instrumentalized in a situation where we're coming up in elections. So you can see also there's a risk that youth also being used for political purposes and not really as promoters for peace. So I think to discuss these guiding principles and see how we can engage better with youth is absolutely important. And I really look forward to hear also the panelists, also Noor and others who have representatives coming from a country like Lebanon, I understand. So I think that's the opportunity to give a voice to the youth, and I really look forward and thank the organizers for having this meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm pleased to welcome, and I apologize in advance, as I'm sure many do, Olivier Nduhungirehe, Deputy Permanent Representative of Rwanda to the United Nations, to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And the Permanent Mission of Rwanda is honored to co-host the launch of the guiding principles on youth people's participation in peacebuilding. It is indeed Rwanda's firm belief that young people have an essential role to play in building peace in the aftermath of conflict. Many of them are involved in peacebuilding initiatives in their communities, helping mend the wounds of war and rebuild their economies. During our time as chair of the Peacebuilding Commission in 2011, the role that young people can play in transforming societies was evident in all the Commission's country configurations. In Rwanda, in 1994, during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, the youth, mostly uneducated, was indoctrinated and manipulated. And it was said by Ambassador Seger, Burundi is kind of a twin country to Rwanda, and we know how youth, uneducated youth, can be manipulated for actually political conflict that can lead to mass atrocities. And this is why that in the aftermath of the genocide in Rwanda, the government recognized and engaged the youth in every aspect of society and gave them a voice in rebuilding our then shattered country, including by reserving 2 seats in the parliament for youth organizations to convey their concerns. The government aligned youth programs to national unity and reconciliation agenda, especially by developing reconciliation projects targeting the youth. These programs are a way of creating a national identity and serve to help people realize that being Rwandan was more important than belonging to a particular ethnic group. This is very important to avoid the instrumentalization of the youth that Ambassador Seger talked about. Today, the Rwandan youth are at the forefront of peace mechanisms through their involvement in different peace initiatives like human rights organizations.
Oh, sorry, we just have to do this.
Hello?
Hi, Ahmad?
Yes.
Oh, just hold for 1 minute, but we're glad that you're here now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, continue, please.
Yes, I was saying that today the Rwandan was at the the youth of Rwanda was at the forefront of peace mechanism through the involvement in different peace initiatives like human rights organizations, youth councils from grassroots to national level, and the government has put in place other mechanisms to facilitate entrepreneurship and skills development, all of which contribute to sustainable peace and minimize the risk of tensions. But it is worth noting that such level of empowerment will not have been possible should the government have not initiated the universal access to education through the 12 years basic education. Now, Rwanda, there is a 12 years basic education which is free for all children, which gives a level of knowledge to our youth, and then we believe that this was the only way to create self-esteem in the mindset of our youth, for them to be able to participate in the decision-making bodies while developing our capacities and skills. Then the time has come to turn to these young people who strive for peace. This is just what the guiding principles on youth people's participation to peace building do. Call us to promote young people's participation as an essential condition to peace building, value young and build upon people's diversity, enable young people's leadership in peace building initiatives, find them, learn from them, and support them. I thank you.
Thanks to both of our opening speakers for providing such, I think, specific examples of both the challenges of working with youth, but also some of the victories from Burundi and Rwanda. Just to mention that here at IPI, we're also looking to youth as key contributors to lasting peace. Many of you might be familiar with a volume that IPI published last October called Talking to Arab Youth, which offered a closer look at youth activists in Egypt and Tunisia. And later this year, we'll publish research on local youth-led initiatives for peace in Burundi, as well as youth participation in political processes in the Sahel Maghreb. So we're very delighted today to be part of this launch of the Guiding Principles. You have the biographies of our speakers, so I'll just briefly introduce each one before they speak. And our first speaker, thankfully joining us by conference call, is Ahmed Al-Hindawi, the first UN Secretary General's envoy on youth. Ahmed, are you there?
I'm here.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. a great honor to join you, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't make it in person, and maybe for a good reason as well. I'm here in Stockholm now, and it's a good coincidence, in fact, that I'm now at the City Hall where the Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize, is being handed to the winners. Maybe not the Peace Prize, because that's one in Oslo, but this is very much in line with what you are discussing and launching there. So allow me to do welcome and thank very much the ambassador of Switzerland, and also the deputy permanent representative to Rwanda to the United Nations, and also my fellow speakers for joining today, and to commend this important work, and to congratulate the sub-working group for this impressive outcome. And I could not agree more with every single word that's in this guiding principles. I think it's a timely work, and it coincides also with the PGA event who has been championing as well the youth agenda. So allow me first again to congratulate you for this work, and to extend my full support to the outcomes and this document that shows much needed, in fact, ideas for how to engage young people in peace building. Now, speaking about young people in peace building, and probably in many cases we have seen how young people are being perceived or portrayed as perpetrators of conflict. And what we are offering today, and what we came up with, is as a concrete ideas and guiding principles for shifting from portraying young people as the perpetrators of conflict to the promoters of peace. And no peace could be sustained or achieved without the engagement of young people. It's a pity that we don't see many young people are involved in these negotiations. And I just invite you to take a second and think about how many young people are deployed in conflict, and they are not called when it comes to the time to discuss peace and peace negotiations. I think this should reverse. And now we have an idea how to do this. There are some impressive guiding principles, and this document could show exactly the how to engaging people in the peace building process, and setting some quality criteria for this involvement to make sure that this is a meaningful contribution, and also to make sure that peace is sustained. With 1.5 billion young persons who are people around the world who are living in conflict zones today, we know that the issue of peace and security, and the issue of finding the foundation for any development work, which is a peaceful society, is one of the priorities for young people. It's not a surprise at all that among the top 5 priorities that emerge from my World Survey, peace and security were among one of these top 5 priorities for young people globally. So it's an issue that concerns young people around the world, and I think it's time for all of us to join forces by highlighting the need to engage young people in peace building and peace promotion. I'm convinced that we can sustain development again, and we can never achieve a sustainable peace without engaging young people, because peace at the end of the day is not an agreement that could be only signed. It's about having agents of change who can translate this agreement in the ground. It's not only between politicians, it's not only between diplomats, it's not only between representative governments. That's extremely important indeed, but the engagement of people, and young people in this case, is extremely important. I was speaking about a youthful world today, and half of the world population under 25 years of age. And from the 1.8 billion young persons who are living on our planet today, 87% of young people are coming from developing countries. And some of these developing countries are really hit by conflicts and instability, and it's time again to engage young people. So these are all reasons why we have to bring young people on board, and we have to engage them in a meaningful way to promote peace, and also to engage them in the peace negotiation and peace process. Again, my message is very simple, and that's I have been sharing all the time, that we should stop using young people as tools in conflict, but rather as agents for peace and realizing peace. And they can be up to this challenge, and they can meaningfully and strategically contribute for lasting peace. So what we have today, again, set of guiding principles for how to do that. And I think it's our job now, our collective job, to make sure that in any future peace negotiations, in the current peace negotiations, young people are called on board. And just looking to all the conflicts that we have around the world today, we realize that the most effective, we can argue, of course, that women and children, but also young people. I visited the Atri camp for Syrian refugees in Jordan, I've met young people who are in their early 20s and they can't be in a school anymore, and they have absolutely no prospects for future, for training or job opportunities, and they are just spending years in the camp now, and they can't see an exit way out of this conflict. So, what we need to do is to harness this talent and the potential of young people to turn this conflict to peaceful processes, and also to allow young people to advocate for a better future. It's only by engaging young people we will be able to have a peaceful world for us and the generations to come. So once again, I would like to thank the sub-working group for this very important work and this very important project that I really hope member states, UN agencies, and international organizations would refer to and also follow these guiding principles. A special thanks here for a friend and a very inspiring person who's Saji Berlis, who I think has done a remarkable job and continue championing for this, for Saji and his colleague who got all this effort to bring this important work forward. And from my position as Secretary General's Envoy in Youth, I cannot be more thankful to all the members of the sub-working group and Peacebuilding and for highlighting and elevating the issue of youth and peacebuilding. I think, again, it's time for all of us to engaging people in building peace and development. For me, development is always about two words only. It's about sustaining and maintaining the planet, and it's about the people and making the people's lives in a better condition, allowing young people to reach their true potential. That's the development we are talking about. And we cannot really achieve the world we want without addressing the issue of the conflict zones and all these the fragile states where young people are among the most affected in this. And just, to conclude with, in the 1.5 billion who are living in conflict zones and the fragile states, they will not be able to achieve even one goal of the 8 MDGs by 2015. And this is just a clear example for how much conflict and instability would risk any development efforts and would keep us at the square of providing humanitarian assistance rather than to move to development and eventually to sustainable development. I thank you very much, and again, congratulations for this work.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We'll turn now to our first speaker in the room on the panel, and it will be wonderful to hear from a primary example of what we're here to talk about today. This is Noor, a young peace builder from Lebanon and a board member of the Lebanese Children's Council. Noor.
Hello, my name is Noor. I'm 15 years old. I'm from Lebanon, and I'm really happy to be here today, representing children from my lovely country, a country that suffered a long, tough war, and still we can see and feel its consequences, even though the civil war has ended a long time ago. I'm also here representing other children and young people who have engaged in peace building in their countries. Peace is really important to have, and without it we can't achieve other goals. My generation wants peace. You're probably wondering why I'm here. Well, I'm a member of the Children's Council, a program created by World Vision Lebanon. The Children's Council is a body of children and youth from 9 to 18 years old, whose main goal is to give young people a voice. We represent all the children from different regions where we live. 2 years ago, I was elected as one of the board members of the Children's Council, and one of my responsibilities is to represent and to talk on behalf of all the other children. We organize different social activities and campaigns to raise awareness about many problems that affect our life. And now, I'd like to thank you very much for these guiding principles that are very helpful for young people when they participate in peace-building activities. I want to mention that in the Children's Council that I'm a part of, we already put in practice a lot of these principles in our activities. For instance, we applied the first principle, which speaks about promoting young people's participation, when we conducted the Festival of Hope, which brought together many different types of people, Sunnah, Shiite, Christians from my village, and many other villages. It was a big forum about diversity. We had many booths made by children talking about anti-discrimination, how to stop violence against children, health and children's rights. There was also a space to play games with each other and learn about these important topics through these games. Children and youth took full leadership to prepare and conduct all the activities. When we all work together, we can build something great. It's very important for young people and adults to talk and listen to each other, which I noticed is another guiding principle. We were involved in the post-2015 consultations, where we gathered and identified the main problems we are suffering from, prioritized them, and finally sent our recommendation through a letter and a video to Her Majesty Queen Rania Al Abdallah, Queen of Jordan, as the representative of the Middle East in the high-level panel at the UN. And this book summarizes everything we did. We asked her to make our voices heard. When she responded, the children and youth of Lebanon felt so special. She wrote, I trust that many of you will be opinion leaders and that you will carve your names among the distinguished of the coming days. I feel like I'm carving my name here today. Moving to another principle which values and builds upon young people's diversity and experiences. All the activities that I mentioned before and the structure of the Children's Council show this principle. Our council consists of children from many different backgrounds and religions. Lebanese people are part of 2 major religions and 18 different confessions, and a big part of the conflicts in Lebanon are caused by religious differences. That's why we, children and youth, try to accept our differences and work together to build peace. The Children's Council gave us a place where we can all come together, learn about our differences, and not fight with, but accept each other. For example, we did one activity about discrimination and ways to fight it. We produced a photo advocacy book that shows through pictures and quotes how we can raise awareness to end discrimination. We also wrote a report to the UN Human Rights Council to raise awareness on the situation of children in my country. Gender equality is also present in the activities we do. In Lebanon, girls are not treated the same way as boys. But in the Children's Council, we make sure there's the same number of girls and boys in each council. And both girls and boys should be able to participate. This gives girls more confidence and opportunities to talk about their own problems from their points of view. I was even selected to write an article about girls' participation. This article was published in the prestigious Brussels magazine Girls' Right Gazette. This was for a special edition on the International Day of Girl Child. And that's what the third principle talks about. Last but not least, I want to tell you about something I was a part of this year. In Lebanon, there are child-friendly spaces of Syrian refugee children. The children came together to write a child-led report. They spoke about the problems they are facing in the host communities in Lebanon and Jordan, at different levels, in the home, at school, in the community, and in the countries they moved to. We, the members of the Children's Council, met with the Syrian children, and despite all the conflicts that arose between Lebanese and Syrians due to this crisis, we wanted to break the ice created by the political situation and to share with each other what we hope for, to show them that we can make peace together and build on it for a better future. We are now planning what to do next, like a campaign to raise awareness about what Syrian children go through. Thank you for these guiding principles that will help us and other children and youth to work together for peace building and to create a better world for everyone. I think it would help if it was written in a way that children and youth can understand. Also, I think it's important that children and youth are listened to. You know, sometimes people ask us what we think, but don't really listen to us. I was wondering if you asked other children and youth about what they thought about these principles when you wrote them. If not, I hope you do, because as you can see, we would have a lot to say. Finally, I want you to know that I'm extremely proud and happy to represent children from my country and to raise their voices. And I'd like to thank you all for listening to me.
And thank you, Noor, for telling us about all of this really important work. Noor, in her presentation, referenced some of the guiding principles, and there were copies in the back as you came in, but you will also hear a presentation of those quite soon. First, we're going to turn to Saji Prelis, who's the Director for Children and Youth Programs at Search for Common Ground, and who has served as a co-chair of the UN Sub-Working Group on Youth Participation in Peacebuilding. And he's going to give an introduction into the consultation process that led to these principles.
Thank you. Ambassadors from Rwanda and Switzerland, thank you for your support and to making this event happen, and the International Peace Institute for hosting this and being part of this process, and we really appreciate the continued effort IPI is involved with in supporting peace building and youth participation in peace building and trying to create the evidence base for what works. So it's very thoughtful. And I also want to thank you for coming here and for all of you who are joining us online as well on this momentous occasion for helping to be part of this global launch of these guiding principles for young people's participation in peace building. I wanted to, I think it's a privilege and an honor as a co-chair to share this space with you as a founding member and a co-chair. But I wanted to spend my time talking about the process. And this process was long, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about that story. And I've highlighted in two ways. One, the success of this is dependent on a partnership approach we had from the very, very beginning. And the partnership was, where it came about was because these guiding principles we have, they are not owned by Search. They are not owned by any single UN entity either. They were not created by Search or any UN entity. They were created by a multitude of organizations, UN agencies, international NGOs, scholars and students, as well as youth organizations who come together collaboratively over a year and a half, and 13 and a half drafts later come to this draft that you see here. So the partnership was extremely critical, and it was a very collaborative process over the years. Second is the key partners that we've had in helping this make this happen. And I regret this if I don't mention this, because we will not be here if not for Ravi Kakara from UN Habitat, who really helped institutionalize. He was one of the founding members, but also institutionalized this partnership within the UN system. And with the support of the UN Focal Point on Youth at UNDESA, really made this sub-working group part of the UN Interagency Working Group on Youth Development. So that institutionalized the process within the UN system also, and brought more UN member families together to help support this, guide this process. So I wanted to acknowledge and appreciate and thank both the individuals, Nicola Shepherd and Ravi Kakra, for that effort. And part of that, key champions. These two were two of those key champions. But the effort had to move forward, and the effort was helped move forward because of the tireless efforts of organizations like UNICEF, UN Habitat, UNFPA, UN Alliance of Civilizations, for example. Yet, it didn't stop there. We had international organizations like Mercy Corps, World Vision, Save the Children, who helped the process move forward. It didn't stop there either. We had youth-led organizations also championing it. Organizations like United Network of Young Peace Builders, an organization that has 60 members in 34 countries helping to provide feedback for this. Also, we had the Girl Scouts Association. A colleague is also here in the audience. Donors like USAID, I'm not sure if they're here, but USAID was also helpful in the latter stages in guiding us and pushing this through. And I think that is very critical, because these guiding principles will not be effective if we don't have donors supporting this as well. So I want to acknowledge USAID's efforts as well. So like I said, this consultative process, over 1,500 people, 1,500 people were reached because all these champions and these partners were reaching out to their networks, not just within the New York area, but in the countries as well. I think last time I checked, there were 34 countries people gave feedback from to help guide this process forward. So this would not be possible if not for all these people. And I want to yield this floor to the next phase of this conversation.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Henk-Jan Brinkman, Chief of the Policy Planning and Application Branch of the UN Peacebuilding Support Office here in New York. And he served as the other co-chair of the working group that produced these guiding principles. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to IPI and Rwanda and Switzerland in particular for supporting this. Sajid said, this has really have been a very collaborative effort, and we couldn't have done it with without any of you. Some of the inspiration came from the Secretary General's report on peacebuilding at the end of 2012, where we tried to make the argument about the essential nature of inclusivity in peacebuilding processes. And that includes, of course, youth. And actually, I just came across from the General Assembly debate on peaceful and stable societies, and that point was there raised as well, and specifically around the importance of including youth in peacebuilding processes. So if I may just walk you through the principles a little bit in terms of the content. Of course, I can never give the real feel of it like Noor did, and I will refrain from that. But if I may just have one shot at summarizing it in a few words. It is find the youth, value them, learn from them, support them, engage them, create an enabling environment and the opportunities for engagement, but be sensitive to the divides among youth, to gender, to the victims, to their safety, first of all, but also to those who committed violence and how to engage with them without incentivizing them. So in the terms of the first principle, very much inspired by the Secretary General's report, that inclusion of youth is really critical for sustainable peace. And of course, we all know that it takes a long time to build peace, and that really needs to be built into the project and the programs. The second principle is really about the diversity, and that I think I can do any better than Noor did, so I will stop adding anything to that. The third is about the sensitivity to gender dynamics. We have to stay away from stereotypical assumptions about gender roles and make sure that we also include young women in the processes. The fourth principle is about the ownership and the leadership and the accountability. And as the DPR of Rwanda all said, find them, learn them, and support them is really the key there. But we need to make sure that the decision makers and those who have powerful also see the value of this. We need to work with them. But work also with those who are influential among the youth and make sure that the marginalized, the young who perhaps are not prominent, have a role to play. And we need to ensure that there is an accountability for the young people as well who play more prominent roles towards their peers, towards their communities, and toward their partners. The fifth principle is really about do no harm. In physical terms, in social terms, emotional terms, we need to provide a supportive environment, of course, in particular to those who have suffered trauma during violent periods. But we need to be cautious, again, to not incentivize young people who have committed violence. The sixth principle is really about making sure that in all stages, from the analysis to the programming design, to the monitoring evaluation, it has an involvement from youth. And in all those stages, but also at all levels, at the national level, the subnational level, the local level. It's really critical that there is civic engagement, that there is accountability mechanisms throughout these phases. The seventh principle is that we need to really nurture the skills that the young have already in terms of mediation, in terms of negotiation, conflict resolution, communication, etc. And we need to make sure that we develop violent prevention strategies that go beyond the security approach that is most typical and include the families, includes the schools, and includes the communities. And the eighth is about an intergenerational dialogue. We need to make sure that youth are connected to people who are older, who might have more power, but who are critical in making sure that there is an engagement from youth in peace-building processes. And then finally, the principle is about youth in policies. We need to make sure that there are places through which youth can participate and influence policies that are really focused on youth. And there are some areas that we need more research, and that should be supported as well. So these principles are really about the what. What we're doing next is trying to develop also how we can provide some guidance on how to do it better based on lessons learned and good practices. If I may just end with 2 words on the Peacebuilding Fund, who have actually supported quite a bit of projects that are focused on youth or have a youth component. And actually 30% of all money spent by the Peacebuilding Fund since its inception has a youth component. And 2 examples are Yemen, in which we have supported youth participating in a national dialogue, and in Nepal, engaging children and youth who have or should been associated with armed forces to make sure that they are socially integrated and participate in peace building and supporting of social harmony. Thanks.
Thank you. That was an excellent overview, I think, of the principles, and it's great to have those 2-word bullets for us all to remember of find the youth, value them, learn from them, and so on. Before we turn to your questions, we're going to just quickly turn back to Saji, who will give us a quick overview of what's next for this process and the principles.
Thank you again. Thank you, Henk-Jan, for giving the synopsis of what the meat be in the guiding principles. And I really want to ensure that there's enough time for conversations as well, so I'll be very brief on this. There are 2 parallel processes going to be taking place coming up, starting this coming month in May itself. One is Up to Search for Common Ground is working in partnership with UN agencies, international NGOs, youth organizations in up to 16 or 17 countries to launch these guiding principles in these countries. Some of the countries include from Niger and Liberia to the Democratic Republic of the Congo to Nepal, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Yemen, Lebanon, and places like that. So no, we'll make sure we engage you as well. Why is that important? These guiding principles are fantastic, but where does it really, what it matters most in the countries we work in countries where it gives people an opportunity to use these guiding principles to improve programs, to develop good programs with high quality that really meaningfully engages young people. So that's also the spirit of this as well, to improve accountability and improve program quality in how we design our programs. So we're reflecting the global effort at the country level by engaging partners in moving this process forward. And these guiding principles in these 17 countries will be contextualized to the country context also. So it's local, global to local context. The other is we have the operational guidance. Henk-Jan briefly mentioned this. So these guiding principles will be complemented by operational guidance. And again, this is at a global level. We are planning this. We welcome people who are interested, bringing your technical expertise to come on board to join us in this process and help us in it, in identifying how that next step can shape. So it can be concrete and very realistic. And that's going to, and our timeline is between now and before the end of this year, we will have concrete operational guidance also to complement and provide this for the community of practice that is flourishing right now around supporting young people's participation in peace building. Noah, you gave us a really good challenge, and I thank you for that, because one challenge you mentioned was that these guiding principles should reflect more young people's perspectives and be more youth-friendly, if I may, right? So thank you for that. So the first step in that, in Sri Lanka, the World Youth Congress that is happening next month, in a few weeks, we will have a side event primarily focused on bringing young people in to talk to them and share these guiding principles and see how they make sense to them. What advice do they have, and how can they be involved in making them more youth-friendly, if you may. So we are working with you on this then. Okay? The other is that the ambassadors brought in this idea that young people are already involved. Absolutely agree. In Burundi and Nepal and Rwanda and other places, young people are already involved. It was mentioned that we focus so much on the bad things young people do. But if you really look at it, it's a small percentage of people who do bad things. A vast majority of them are doing great, fantastic things in societal transformation work in their countries. We heard from Nepal, we heard from World Vision's examples, using peace committees organized in multiple countries, I think in Colombia, Kosovo, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, where peace movements are flourishing with young people driving that force. Search for Common Ground also is involved in the same way. Our focus is taking a societal approach to conflict transformation, where we engage young people, but at an intergenerational level, so that they actually can not only articulate a vision for the country, but do it in non-adversarial ways, by engaging across generations. But then we use media as platforms to motivate and encourage and give concrete examples in popular culture what young people are doing constructively to shape their future and their presence. In a number of countries, whether it's in Nepal with armed groups, members moving out, getting trained by other youth organizations itself, and becoming mediators in land disputes, to in Indonesia, where we're working in prisons to prevent recidivism among young people, but working across cultures, across the different dividing lines in Indonesia, around with pesantrens, Islamic boarding schools, where young people are sharing a new future for themselves in very volatile areas where there is a lot of activism for extremism, where they are carving out a space using social media, using television programs to really show that young people are doing more good things than bad things, and trying to build the confidence, working with adult counterparts to build confidence that young people are partners. Young people should be partners and can be partners, and enabling them to jointly address the issues that are dividing them. Because the issues that people are facing are not unique to young people, or not unique to men or women. It's societal. And young men, young women together, in partnership with adults, are the ones who are trying to take this forward, whether it's in Burundi or other places. So it's really a tremendous pleasure to see all this. And these guiding principles are going to help in shaping the programs so we can be more accountable to young people. And I thank you again for being here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. We're going to turn directly now to your questions. I'll take 3 questions at a time, and just a reminder that this event is being webcast. So please introduce yourself with a name and affiliation before your question. Back here.
My name is Harriet Mandel, and I'm founder and director of the Global Roundtable. This is my first encounter with this important initiative, and I wish all those involved a really wonderful future ahead, and good luck in all success. I'm a little perplexed. I'm using this in quotations, and saddened at a significant and striking omission. I don't even know if it's an elephant in the room here, but Jewish children and Israel haven't even been mentioned, neither in the panel discussions nor in any of the literature. And each of the presenters, including the ambassadors, spoke so movingly about the partnerships, about the voice. Nor, you talked about the children's voice, about the 8 principles. And this seems to be such a striking omission in what children can do to become partners, including the Jewish and Israeli children who are, of course, so involved and have been so affected by conflict themselves. So I'd like to hear from all of you about how to address this, particularly because there are so many United Nations, neutral agencies that are involved. It just seems to me such a remarkable omission. Thank you very much.
Do we have another question? Here in the second row.
My name is Sarah Overton. I'm an artist, and I've been doing a lot of things around compassion training. And my question is wondering, specifically since people mentioned the important role of education, if there's any provision for trainings like the Roots of Empathy program for training children in empathy, or the compassion trainings that are being developed at Stanford and Emory universities. And I think Stanford is actually going to be training at Columbia in the compassion training. So those were sort of my primary questions. And then for Noor, there's also a really interesting program called the Compassion Games, which might be of interest to you. And then the other thing I wondered about too was there's a wonderful book called Brainstorm by Dr. Daniel Siegel, which talks all about the potential of youth to engage meaningfully. So.
Thank you. And I saw the back row. We can take one more.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Elizabeth Nyland. I work for the Focal Point on Youth in UN DESA. Firstly, a comment. The Focal Point on Youth in DESA oversees the interagency network that the sub-working group is a part of. And just from our side, their work has really, really been amazing and quite commendable. So a really good example, not just of a concrete product that's come out of the group, but also a very interagency, civil society, youth-based structure to their work, which I think for other working groups in the UN can really take a strong example from including civil society and young people in particular. So very well done. We're very proud of your work on that front. I should probably know the answer to this, given I'm so strongly associated with you. But so you're talking about young people, and given that there are so many agencies involved in the compilation of these principles, young people, youth structures, stakeholders, what do you define young people as? What age bracket? Or do you leave that up to the individual entities and people working with the principles?
Thank you. So just to overview, we had a question about what children can do to become partners with specifically a view to Jewish children in Israel. Second, the role of compassion and empathy training programs as we talk about education with these principles. And then third, a definition of young people. So perhaps we can start with Henk-Jan and then move down the panel in this direction.
Good. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the questions and thanks for the comments. On the first one, I think what we really try to do is value the diversity in many different ways, including different religions, which is reflected in Principle 2.2. And that's already one of the longest principles, and we really felt like we had a discussion on this, to what extent we should just say value diversity or whether mention certain components of the diversity. And so we just try to summarize, rather than list all different religious nominations, just a religion as one of the important diversity components that you need to be taken account of. And of course, that doesn't minimize the importance of particular issues and the Jewish children and the Palestinian children and other children all over the world, and in particular in Israel and the occupied territories. On the second point about education, I think that is very true indeed, and that is reflected, I think, in partly in Principle 7.1, where we really try to emphasize the importance of mediation skills, of conflict resolution skills, in various contexts. And of course, the importance of education is no doubt, and UNICEF has actually a program on on education and peace building that really values that particular aspect as well. And then finally, on the definition, the official UN definition is 15 to 29. We try to avoid that by talking about young people rather than youth. We also recognize in Principle 2.1 that there are various definitions that are really dependent on the national context. And in some countries, actually, they go up to even 40. So it really is very, very different. And we want to make sure that these principles can be used in all different contexts and not exclude any particular age group, because we have a UN definition that limits everything to between 15 and 29. So we try to be flexible on that.
Thank you. And I just want to note that we've been joined here on the panel by one of Noor's chaperones from World Vision Lebanon, and he's just assisting with some interpretation during the question period. So, Noor, did you want to add anything?
I just want to say that I really think that children should all work together, no matter what nations they're from, and they all should be maybe gathering together and looking to the same goal, to reach peace, no matter who they are. And I think what I really want is just to raise their voice, no matter what, where they come from, how old are they. And I really think that youth is not about age, it's about your soul, it's about your thoughts. It doesn't matter. You can be like maybe 10 and you have those brilliant thoughts, and you could be 20 and have no brilliant thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. Saji? Okay. We can take more questions now. I see Kai. Anyone else?
Thank you. Kai Stavo, independent researcher. I just had a question for Henk on the principles. How is the collaboration and sort of implementation of these principles together with the Mediation Support Office, together with the Security Council as a whole? I mean, in the sense that if these principles have now been created and agreed upon, the implementation that then guarantees participation of youth in mediation efforts, etc. So I just want to hear if you could speak a little bit more about the collaboration with mediation support.
And the front row, we have a question.
Thank you. My name is Shulamit Koenig. Being 84, I'm probably the youngest youth in the group here. What we are doing is we promote the learning of human rights as a way of life around the world. And we have started now a program which I want to ask you whether you could take it as a ninth or a principle or way. For every woman to become a human rights mentor, to close the gap of dignity. When you, who is not treated as an equal, when you work with others on human rights, this is the first step towards equality. So I'm asking you if you will consider to think of something very overarching while you do your work, that every youth in the world will become a mentor of human rights as a way of life.
Anyone else? At the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Hugo Angulo from the Mission of El Salvador. Regardless to the principles, I would just, if you can talk a little bit more about the principle 1.4. If you can expand a little bit about what do we mean about long-term and collaborative initiative with young people, as well as the existing efforts. Can you explain a little bit more about that, please?
We'll go back to the panel and then we'll have time for more. So Saji, did you want to start this time?
Sure. I love the idea of a human rights approach, but I think there was another word you used that we actually, Search for Common Ground, we embrace quite a bit, and I think a lot of other NGOs also do. It's about dignity as well, and engaging young men and young women as well, because the dignity for young people is about making sure we celebrate, acknowledge, and enable young people to celebrate their sense of identity and also their dignity. And that's a fundamental principle also when we do programs around the world, because oftentimes that gets squashed with a whole other program element to it. So that's one thing. The other thing is around engaging men and women, including young men and young women, because oftentimes when it comes to peace building, people think of conflict and associate it with men itself. And that's not very good or very healthy either, because young men and young women are involved in acts of violence, and more young men and women are involved with peace-building efforts. So it should be taken as both. And when you look at it from a societal perspective, both genders, young men and young women, are part of the society, and they need those role models and mentors among themselves to hold them up and create pathways for peace in their communities. It's not just one gender, one male or female. To the question of promoting Guiding Principle 1.4, promote sustainable long-term collaborative initiatives, I think the spirit really, and I'll ask Henk-Jan to follow up on this, is about having short-term programs alone is not enough. To see results in fragile environments where relationships have been torn apart, the fabric has been ripped, to stitching them back together, you cannot expect miracles overnight. These things take a lot longer. And I think it's important for donors and practitioners to keep that in mind, as well as policymakers to keep that in mind when they're actually thinking about this, right? Imagine you in a relationship. How long do you take to reconcile the differences in your own personal relationships? Overnight? No, it takes a long time. Imagine that at a national level. That takes sometimes generations. So having short-term goals for that does more harm than good. And that's why it's important to take a long-term perspective, search for common ground, and a lot of organizations have this long-term perspective on engaging at a societal level and in making sure those relationships are stitched back together little by little, and making sure there are adults and local young people as mentors in the public domain. People are seeing those relationships as, oh, they're actually caring about the same things I care about. And they're stitching those relationships. I think that's so critical, and those things take a long time. So that's the spirit, I think, in there.
Noor, did you want to add anything this time? It's okay. And Henk-Jan, maybe you wanted to address the question on kind of UN integration into mediation support?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think that is something that we should really think about. And maybe there should be the mediation support unit should think about a youth mediator on their roster. So we should really talk about our colleagues on that. The mediation itself is something that is very much emphasized in the principles, and of course that also needs to happen. And a lot of it needs to happen at the local level. But that does not exclude the possibility that in mediation processes in which the UN plays a role, that we should also have a role for young people. And I think that's really critical. And thanks for the suggestion on that. Just on the question, I would love actually an 84-year-old woman as a mentor of young people on human rights issues. I think that would be fantastic. The issue of mentoring, I think, and coaching is so critical in peace building and of course in particular of young people. On the long-term issue and the short-term issue, I think it's critical. I mean, we all know that peace building in general takes a generation or longer, as Saji already emphasized, and there is too much an emphasis, and I think we are all guilty of that, that we focus on short-term projects. I mean, the Peace Building Fund has funded them as well, garbage collection or short-term employments around critical periods of elections or something like that, and that might be important. We shouldn't underemphasize that, but that might not create the transformative processes and the long-term effects that are really needed. I mean, are they really learning during those 3 months or 6 months the mediation skills? Are they learning the life skills? Are they learning the skills that are necessary to create their own livelihoods or their own businesses? And that is, I think, really what is important for the longer term sustainability of peace.
We can return for questions, and I believe there was a question in the third row. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Maneshka Eliatambi from Communities Without Boundaries International. Congratulations to Saji, Hank, and everyone else who's been involved in coming up with the guiding principles. It's been a joy to work with you in this process. We have worked on youth and peace building for a while, and your 5.5 talks about maybe being cautious about offering too many opportunities to youth who have been involved in armed conflict. And I want to push a little bit here, because youth don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to pick up an AK-47 and go and kill 20 villages. There is a structural violence that's taking place, an abyss that we, in fact, as adults and structures have been complicit in creating. And so do we fail these youth once again after they have given up their arms? And I've seen it in places like Nepal, places like Sri Lanka, and in various other places where other structures come in and take on that role of working with former combatant youth where we are not acting.
Drew Dumbreck, UNICEF. One of the challenges I've noticed in our work with youth is the issue of mandate. So a lot of the agencies work with youth, but there's always sort of a gap in terms of the activities that they're doing. For example, UNDP does a lot of work with governance and youth, maybe in livelihoods. UNICEF, we also do work with adolescents, but again, there's a mandate constraint. So what I'm wondering is there any possibility in the future to envision a UN agency dedicated to youth issues? We could call it UN Youth. And if so, what would the process be? And does anyone think that that would be value added? Thank you.
I'll add a question, I think, which is, in thinking about this, not only with peace building, but peacemaking and mediation. And Ahmed, the special envoy, also mentioned bringing youth into peace negotiations. So I'm wondering, is that something that you think we will start to advocate for and quantify and measure in the same way that we now measure a percentage, say, of women in a certain peace negotiation? Do you think that's a direction that this could take, or that it will stay in this local community-driven level work? Would you like to start?
Interesting question. I mean, there are a couple of NGOs that are very active and mobilizing around a similar approach indeed as women, peace and security, and Resolution 1325 as the seminal resolution adopted in 2000, to have a similar resolution on youth, peace and security. And so that might lead to, if that comes to fruition, I think World Vision is very active in that, but other NGOs as well. If that comes to fruition, we might indeed end up with something like that. And I'm not going to say whether I'm in favor of a resolution and what it should look like, but and we should really learn also from the experience of women, peace and security. But whether the resolution is the right way to achieve the goal, I do think it's important to have youth at the table, and they have the longest to live, and they have the biggest stake in the countries they live, and are really the biggest advocates of peace. So that I think is without any doubt. I am a little bit hesitant to advocate for another UN agency. We have already quite a few with mandates in those areas. So I think it's more a matter of making sure that we collaborate with each other rather than try to stake out our own turf, which I think is detrimental to all of us. That is actually not a zero-sum game, but I really think it's a negative-sum game. So we really should make that we collaborate with each other, and I don't think we necessarily need another UN entity. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Saji?
Just to piggyback, I think Henk-Jan mentioned that there is a lot of youth groups and others who are motivated by and inspired by the 1325 framework, and have been, one of the organizations actually presented it recently to a group of people about how they can look at exploring a Security Council resolution on youth. And at the same time, there have been others who have also been thinking of exploring the concept of an SRSG position on youth participation in peace building, just like children in armed conflict, but youth in peace building as well. But that's a whole other process. But just planting the seed that there are people who are interested in thinking about it. Going back a little, this process has been very collaborative, agencies coming together. And I mentioned that the operational principles and the launches also is about collaboration and coordination at the country level. And the reason this is so fundamental is because oftentimes we hear Search for Common Ground is doing wonderful work around the world around peace building, but are we talking with or are we learning from other organizations? Similar things we see across UN agencies as well. Individual UN agencies are great at promoting themselves, but not often talking enough with other entities. I think the process of us trying to do this is to get this accountability framework to the local level, at the country level, where we are getting donors, different implementing agencies, different UN agencies, talking to each other and coordinating and to create a community of practice. Why? Because we have to be held accountable. And we cannot be only accountable to donors. We have to be accountable to the young people, like Noah was articulating as well. To do that and to show results, there has to be that conversation locally. And we cannot just say that a lesson learned is that we need to coordinate and collaborate. Every year we see this. We need to act on it also. And this principles is about moving in that direction in a very collaborative, friendly way.
I just want to say something that I want to apologize because I've only read the child-friendly version of the guiding principles, so I just got that original version of it, and in my version there's no points, and it's easier. But I want to say that I think that with coordination and cooperation, everything can happen perfectly. So, thank you.
So this is your final opportunity for a question, if there's any others. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Johnny Mack with Communities Without Boundaries International. The one striking thing that I find in the principles, and they are really fantastic principles, I would agree, but we're talking about peace and human rights and human dignity and worth. The principles mention violence several times. There's an assumption that everyone understands what that means, but I'm struck that there's no occasion in the principles to mention nonviolence. If we're talking about education and training of the young and employing strategies and methodologies and activities for the young, it seems to me learning early in life what nonviolence is and how it can be employed as a way of life would incorporate so much of what we're talking about in terms of human dignity and worth and human rights and so on and so forth. So maybe we might want to consider how we might incorporate such a principle and values itself in terms of nonviolence.
We have one more question at the back.
Hi, my name is Jackie Wolfson, the Shule Foundation, and just piggybacking off of what this gentleman just said, we're starting a program that we hope to roll out across sub-Saharan Africa, and we're going to start with primary students. I just spent 3 months living in a house with 15 former child soldiers, all abducted by CONI, and it's really important to me to have some sort of peace curriculum involved in what we're doing. And I've started talking to people who are in the peace sector, and it's becoming, it seems more complicated. And I know peace is complicated and it's more difficult, but for us to find a starting point has been really complicated. And I would love to actually get Nora's opinion on where you would start with children in primary to make it sort of easy, but a non-violent world, and try to implement that in kids in kindergarten and first grade.
So I think we'll go back to the panel to ask for reflections on these questions around nonviolence as sort of a philosophy and way of life, and then also peace and nonviolence curriculum from a very early age. And I'm familiar with some work that's been done in other parts of the U.S. personally on, especially around in diverse communities where you're teaching biographies of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, using these as a ways to get students from different ethnic backgrounds to interact. But we'll turn to the panel, and with this, I'll ask each of you as well to add any final remarks and reflections, and we'll wrap up, after this run through the panel.
Good. No, thanks a lot. No, that's very much appreciated on the nonviolence side. I mean, I do think it's very much the spirit of that is very much in the principles, even if the term nonviolence is not there. It does talk about violence prevention. But one decision we did take at one point is that, and we will get to that in the operational guidance, that we would not talk about specific interventions in specific sectors. That we were afraid that the principles would be getting too long. And that's probably the reason why we don't talk about peaceful education or nonviolent education, and I really think it is important. And then the reference to UNICEF's education and peacebuilding program, I think, is worth repeating. So I do think that it's something that we really need to look at in more detail when we develop the operational guidance in more depth. And really, I can only end with thanking IPI again, Switzerland and Rwanda, but also our partners, UNICEF, who has been instrumental in the layout and the printing of what we have right here in our hands, and all in time. World Vision, who has been very supportive with bringing Noor here, and of course Search for Common Ground, and everybody else, all 1,500 plus people who have been involved. It has been a great process, and let's come together again on the operational guidance so we can have maybe in a year or so another great IPI event. Thank you.
We'll turn to Saji and then give Noor, our youth representative here, the last word.
Adding to Henk-Jan's recommendations around the peace education curriculum, Save the Children also has done some really good work around that, and there's some good toolkits that they have produced, and also UNICEF's also. But the challenge with this is that you're looking at teacher training as much as curriculum development for children, and there's a lot to think through. So we can talk offline more about this as well. Again, in closing, thanking all the folks who have been part of this to help make this happen. I really am grateful for that, and I'm excited about the next phase, and really that I think is important to have. In closing, I think 2 points. Armed actors are fantastic at recruiting young people and engaging them and providing them the opportunity to express themselves in ways that express themselves. Whether it's for good or bad is immaterial, that the armed actors are fantastic at it. We are not that great yet. We need to get better at it. And these principles about trying to think about how can we innovate around this, how can we really get there, because we really feel that the decision points for a young person to commit violence versus to be a peace builder is not 150, 80 degrees. It's really 5 degrees that we are looking at changing or influencing. So it's really important to keep that in mind, because this is not impossible, this is not rocket science. But we try to complicate it and complexity with all these fancy technical terms when others who are really good at it are not doing that. We really need to take down the rhetoric and really meet with young people where they're at, where they're organizing, and make this really simple. But simple is not simple, it's very complex too. Yet, we need to keep in mind that young people, a majority of young people are choosing to pick up pens or choosing to do things non-violently than violently. We need to shift the paradigm to focusing on young people who are the majority of people around the world who are actively transforming societies in very positive ways and contributing in positive ways and engaging at an intergenerational level to do that. That's the message that we need to take from here too. Thank you.
I want to say that the start is everything. Once we start it right, we can continue right. And I really think that to teach children that violence is really bad, we have to start with ourselves. We have to be convinced that violence is bad and that peace is really important. In addition, we have to do, I think it's important to do sessions for teachers and parents about peace importance and that violence is really harmful for everybody. So the children are really affected by their parents and their environment. So we have to start with the environment. We have the children, they always have to be in a safe environment and where there's peace. And you know that children and everyone in this world, we always watch celebrities and those actors. So maybe we can start with the celebrities. Maybe we can encourage the children and youth through the celebrities that violence is really harmful. I think it's they always watch TV, and we should stop violence from the TV. And yeah. And thank you very much for being here and listening.
So a final thank you to all of our event partners, to IPI's events team for organizing this, to our wonderful panelists here, to Noor for traveling so far for this event, and to all of you for joining us. Thank you.